Welcome into the RotoWire East Region March Madness preview. This is Duke's region. We're gonna be talking Duke a little bit. We're gonna be talking some sleepers, some of our favorites, and finish with our final four picks. So Duke, we do of course have questions on Cooper Fleck, but he should be okay in this one. How much are you worried, Ryan, about Cooper Fleck's injury? Should he rest for these first couple games? You think Duke has it? I'm not too worried about Mississippi State and Baylor, but you think he's going to play right away? How do you think the outlook looks here for them?
I would imagine he plays right away. I could see him being limited for sure. I think they gave Duke probably the easiest draw out of all the one seeds here, especially in that second game. Mississippi State, Baylor, both teams just been incredibly inconsistent throughout most of the season. Maybe he only plays 20, 25 minutes a game in those and just, tries to get through that, see how he feels, see how the swelling is. And then, once we get to the next weekend, which I feel like they should breeze through pretty easily, just unleash him. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's a concern whenever you're talking about, the best player in the country, consensus number one pick. I think defensively is going to be more where that's going to hurt than on the offensive end. But I think at least the good news is, a lot of those guys that, we're just relying on Flag to pretty much do everything. They got a lot of experience and, beat a couple good teams in the ACC tournament, without him. So there's some confidence for those guys.
Yeah, that route looks incredibly, fortunate for them, especially with the injury. Like getting down to the 5-4 range with Oregon, Arizona, Liberty, Akron. Are we looking for some upsets here? I think these are. There's not too many 4 and 5s to talk about, but I feel like these 4 and 5s are like more than the others are just like two teams that seem to have an incredibly high floor, but also could be terrible in any given game. Like Oregon has these games. They already beat Alabama. They closed with an 8-game winning streak before losing to Michigan State. They're a team that I like their makeup. I like their build, but they don't seem to have like a go-to scorer. Biddle can show up in any game. Shellstad can be good in any game, but he isn't really like a go-to point guard scorer for them. Arizona with their defense with Caleb Love, just inconsistent. So what's the look here for the 4 and 5 seed? Do you think either one of those teams gets maybe a first round upset, or is it they're playing really well, they have the confidence, and they're like, let's go beat Duke kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, Arizona, I've been sort of off of them all year. I didn't really know what to make of them most of the season. And Arizona's been known to lose early in the tournament, especially recently. And I feel like I'm always in love with them coming in the tournament, and just they fall flat on their face. So, but I will say that this is just a completely different sort of looking Arizona team. It's not like the sort of pretty high flying Arizona teams that we've seen in the past. Like this is a very gritty, hard-nosed Arizona team. They got a lot of like sort of 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" wings, or sort of smaller four-man that are really physical, good at setting picks, good at offensive rebounding. Henry Vesar has been awesome recently. He's just really coming on. He's a really skilled big man. So, and I also think Caleb Love too. Everybody loved to talk about all these crazy shots he would throw up, his shooting percentages. But I feel like lately he's sort of settled down and sort of just, made the right play within the flow of the offense. So I think Arizona has enough to get to the Sweet 16 here, considering how they're playing.
Yeah, their defense is still an issue. If you look through the schedule, it's like any team they play that's not at home that has like a defense that actually tries, then they lose and struggle a little bit. Fortunately for them, I mean, Akron I don't think is that team. Akron is a running team that I don't think it's going to be like the Akron defense that wins this game. I don't think that's going to happen. And the Oregon isn't really an elite defense either. So I guess maybe we should talk about Liberty. Should we talk about Liberty over Arizona? I guess if you want to do an upset there, that is in range. You don't want to completely overlook them. We know Liberty can win these 12-5 matchups. But yeah, I think it with the way they're playing, they have the size, they have the guards. maybe not the defense once they get to Duke, if it is Duke. But so I think, as you said at the top, Duke, it's just a pretty favorable run for them, no matter almost no matter who they play up until the Elite Eight. And speaking of the Elite Eight, who would face Duke if we get there? What are we looking at the bottom here? BYU, one team that's entering this tournament, playing really well. Their offense has been awesome. Great 3-point shooting team, but another team like Arizona, some defensive issues here. So can BYU make one of these runs here, or is their defense going to catch up to them?
Yeah, I think they're fully capable of it. I mean, yeah, you said it. They were absolutely rolling going into the Big 12 tournament. They drilled 18 threes on Iowa State, and then they just got stomped by Houston, which they got stomped by Houston the first time they played them. So obviously not a good matchup. But I think, if they're able to get past VCU, which has been one of the best defensive teams in the country this year, really, that sort of bottom half of the bracket, you look at a Wisconsin, you look at a potentially an Alabama, those aren't, the scariest, most imposing defensive teams out there. So I think if they're able to get past that big 6-11 matchup, I think they could go a long way here because they have a lot of guys that can just shoot and get hot. Richie Saunders obviously has been tremendous lately. Yegor Damon has been great. He's a 6'9" point guard, just creates a lot of matchup issues. So, yeah, man, this BYU team, I think they got a pretty solid draw as long as they're able to get by that first matchup.
Yeah, that first matchup. Speaking of those games, we have VCU playing Sunday and Wisconsin playing Sunday, and both those teams get a quick turnaround. They're in Denver for these games, which is more local for BYU, more local for Montana. Are you putting anything into that? I originally looked at that VCU-BYU game. I was like, yeah, VCU defense, okay. And then it's like, okay, they got more travel, and BYU's closer to home a little bit. VCU just played Sunday, quick turnaround. Same thing with Wisconsin. It's like, should we put something into this, or maybe just overlook it? Maybe we're just thinking too much.
Yeah, sometimes I get into trouble with that where I try to overthink some of these things, and I look at, who's playing here, who's closer to here, who's going to have more fans here, and it always seems to just get me in trouble. So I feel like, you just got to trust the coaches are going to get their guys ready to play, and just look at the matchup as it is, really.
All right, trust the coaches. I'll trust Ryan Odom to the Sweet 16 it is then. All right, let's do it. The bottom of that one is Alabama, and they get Robert Morris first, but there's possible second matchup. Another SEC team is Vanderbilt sitting there, but I want to talk a little bit about St. Mary's. St. Mary's a team I like. I usually like, going against them because they get all the talk playing in the WCC, entering March Madness. It's just like a slow team, usually not like, NBA caliber players, and they just beat up on the WCC. And I usually like going against them, but I'm trying to find a reason to take them over not only Vanderbilt, but Alabama as well. And they've beaten Gonzaga a couple times. And I want to look back at Alabama 2 years ago in a 1 seed. I thought Alabama was going to smoke San Diego State. It's like, all right, their offense is good, their defense is good, but San Diego State, maybe a little more athletic than the St. Mary's team, probably a little better defensively overall. But do you think St. Mary's can somehow pull this upset, just get Alabama as much as possible into a rock fight, just to grind this thing out as much as possible? It's not the easiest thing because Alabama just runs as much as possible, but what do you think about that? St. Mary's Alabama second round game. Do you think it's possible for the Gales to take that one somehow?
I do. And especially, if Grant Nelson is not healthy for Alabama, I think that's a big concern for them. He injured his knee in the SEC tournament, and as of this recording, we're not exactly sure what his status is going to be. So he does a lot for that team. Obviously, he's a big guy that can handle the ball, push things up the court. So that would be a big loss. And he was great last year in the run to their Final Four. So I think it's in Alabama, right? They won that game against Auburn. But other than that, like, they've kind of struggled the last few weeks. So but I think you look at St. Mary's, right? And one thing they've always been good at is taking away the three. Alabama might still just chuck from out there.
I think
they've always done a really good job of defending the 3-point line. So You're right. I mean, can Alabama win a game that's 66-63? I guess we'll see, but that will be one of the most interesting second round matchups if that were to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess if Grant Nelson doesn't play, that probably means more time for Jaron Stevenson. Going into the season, they did lose Right, but going into the season, you just look at this Alabama team. They added Amori, a big from Rutgers, who is, one of the best big defenders. They added him, and he just really hasn't, for the most part. I know he's had some good games here and there, but one of that early Auburn game, he just didn't really do enough for me as just like a dominant big. I think, if this defense can come around, maybe Nelson isn't as injured as some think he is. RotoWire.com/cbasketball. Again, check out all injury updates. We will have all the injury updates over at RotoWire. So check that out for that Grant Nelson status. But are we too worried about that Grant Nelson injury and just the inconsistencies for Alabama to take them to the Elite Eight, to the Final Four? Is this just Duke bracket to lose here as a 1 seed? And it is, it is a little boring talking about all these 1 seeds, but at the end of the day, metrics on Duke are really good. One of the best teams ever. Cooper Flag, it seems like his injury is okay, and it's not high ankle. It's a minor ankle injury. He should be able to play through it as we get going here. So is the region too favorable for Duke to just take someone else?
Yeah, I mean, that could be another conspiracy. They just gave Duke the easiest path possible, really. But I mean, I feel like if you look at, the Alabama's question marks, questionable play of late, an Arizona team that's been sort of all over the place all year, an Oregon team that's kind of been the same way, up and down. I think Wisconsin, we should probably mention them as well. Probably the best offensive season under Greg Gard, and definitely a sort of different looking Wisconsin team than we're accustomed to. But I still just don't really see anybody that's going to be able to match what Duke is going to be able to give them on both sides of the ball. I mean, they got advantages at every position basically, so it's tough to say another team besides Duke.
It's kind of crazy, all the teams in this region to face Duke, all these top teams. It's just like mostly offensive heavy, not defensive oriented. Okay, let's not including St. Mary's in here. Don't worry, St. Mary's, but Alabama, Wisconsin, BYU, Arizona, Oregon, to extent, just all these teams that not consistent defensively, aren't teams that rank well defensively in the metrics, all in Duke's region. Great offensively, but also great defensively. So Duke, Final Four, there it is. We'll see who gets. Who do you think will be playing against them in the Elite Eight? Sorry,
I like BYU. I think everything, the way this bottom half of the bracket sets up, I think they got a really good shot here. And they don't play anybody that's going to be super physically imposing. I don't think that's going to sort of be able to wear them out like a Houston was able to a couple times this season. So I think they've got a lot of guys that can make a lot of shots from out there. So I would love to see this BYU team go on a run and maybe match up with Duke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you don't want to pick Alabama, I feel like it's almost any of those teams could do it. Wisconsin inconsistent, BYU's defense is whatever. Maybe Montana, maybe VCU makes a run. Maybe St. Mary's or Vanderbilt makes a run. I think any of these teams really could be sitting there in the Elite Eight if Grant Nelson isn't healthy, if Alabama has a bad shooting day. I think this is one of the more, sections, bottom half of the region that's a little more wide open, I feel like, than most in this tournament. But that is the East region preview. Check out all of RotoWire's previews over at youtube.com/@RotoWire Fantasy Basketball. See you back for the South region preview.